Warning. Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. You go to the mountains for peace and quiet. But in Appalachia, the quiet just means something is hunting you. Tonight, we have 3 disturbing Appalachian Mountains horror stories inspired by true events. Verified encounters from the people who lived them. A carpenter, a young couple, and 2 hardware store workers. First, the carpenter hikes 10 miles deep to escape a stranger, only to wake up and find the man zipped inside his tent. Next, the couple ignores the cabin rule. When the bugs stop screaming, lock the door immediately. Finally, the workers wander into a GPS blank spot where the map turns gray, and only one of them ever comes back. So lock your windows and turn up the volume, because out here, no one can hear you scream. Subscribe if you want to survive the night. Let's begin. Hoyt hiked 10 miles through the steep mountains, moving as fast as he could to get away from the strange man in the flannel shirt. When he woke up at 1:11 a.m. to find the man sitting inside his zipped tent, the math made no sense. The man had no flashlight or water, and would have had to run like an Olympic sprinter in the pitch black to catch him, leaving Hoyt trapped in the dark with someone who shouldn't be there. Sweat ran down Hoyt's back. Roan Mountain in July wasn't a walk in the park. It was a grind. Hoyt knew this trail. He framed houses for a living, so he knew hard work, but this incline burned his lungs. He stopped to drink from his canteen. He wiped his face and looked up the trail. That's when he saw him. 50 yards up, a guy was standing there. He didn't look like a hiker. No walking sticks, no fancy boots. He wore a heavy flannel shirt, thick jeans, and clean work boots. It was 90 degrees with humidity thick enough to chew on, yet this guy wasn't sweating. Hoyt capped his canteen. The hair on his arms stood up. In construction, you learn to trust your gut. If a beam looks weak, you don't walk on it. This guy looked wrong. He had no backpack, no water. He was miles from the parking lot. You don't wander this far up a mountain without water unless you have a death wish. Hoyt started walking again. He had to pass him. He kept his head down, focused on his boots, planning to give a quick nod. As he got closer, the woods felt too quiet. Hoyt stepped past the man, hugging the edge of the trail. "How's it going?" Hoyt mumbled. The man didn't answer. Hoyt glanced over. The guy was smiling, a wide plastic grin showing too many teeth. He didn't blink. He looked like a wax statue left in the sun. Hoyt walked faster. He didn't run, but he lengthened his stride, listening for footsteps. Nothing. After 100 yards, Hoyt looked back. The trail was empty. Most people would have turned around. Hoyt didn't. He figured the guy was just a weirdo day hiker. He wanted to stick to his plan, hike 10 miles in, camp on the peak, and clear his head. So he pushed it. He hiked hard, covering ground that would take a normal person 2 days. He wanted distance. 10 miles later, deep in the backcountry with no cell service, he found a flat spot. He set up his small one-person tent, a tiny nylon coffin. He ate some jerky and crawled inside. Night fell fast. 1 minute it was twilight, the next it was pitch black. Hoyt zipped the door shut. He told himself he was safe. Logic was on his side. To get here, the flannel guy would have needed a flashlight, water, and speed. Nobody runs 10 miles uphill in the dark without gear. It was impossible. Hoyt drifted off. He went out like a light. He didn't dream. It was just blackness until a specific sound woke him up. Hoyt's eyes snapped open. 1:11 a.m. He lay perfectly still. His heart slammed against his ribs. The noise had come from his feet. the distinct sound of a zipper sliding open. Maybe I imagined it, he thought. Maybe it was the wind. He waited. It was dead silent. Then he heard a shuffle inside the tent. Hoyt reached for his flashlight. His hand shook. He clicked the button. The beam cut through the dark and Hoyt froze. Sitting at the foot of his sleeping bag, cross-legged, was the man in the flannel shirt. He was inside. The zipper was closed behind him. The space was tiny. Their knees almost touched. The man sat there, perfectly comfortable, still not sweating. His clothes were crisp. Hoyt couldn't breathe. The man looked down. He held a rusted hunting knife and a small whetstone. He ran the stone down the blade. The sound of metal scraping stone filled the tent. It was a rhythmic, grinding noise. The man looked up at Hoyt. That same plastic smile was plastered on his face. He didn't blink. He just sharpened the knife, back and forth. Stone on steel. Hoyt was paralyzed. He was a big guy, but this wasn't a fight. This was impossible. How did he find the tent in the dark? How did he get inside without waking Hoyt until the zipper closed? The man tilted his head like a bird watching a worm. He kept smiling. For 5 minutes, the only sound in the world was that knife being sharpened. Then the man stopped. He put the stone in his pocket. He inspected the blade's edge and nodded. He didn't lunge. He simply turned around, unzipped the door, and crawled out. Hoyt watched him disappear. The cold mountain air rushed in. Hoyt sat there with his flashlight, waiting for the scream, waiting for the attack. He waited until sunrise. When the light hit the trees, Hoyt scrambled out. The campsite was empty. He looked at the soft mud. Hoyt's boot prints were everywhere, but there were no other tracks. No prints leading to the tent. No prints leading away. Hoyt left everything. He left the tent, the bag, the gear. He ran the whole 10 miles back to his truck without stopping. He drove home shaking. He tried to tell himself it was a prank, but the more he looked into it, the more he realized the truth. He hadn't met a prankster. He had met a predator. Hoyt started reading, and the statistics made him sick. He realized the smiling man wasn't unique. He read about Randall Lee Smith. In 1981, Smith murdered 2 hikers in Virginia. He served 15 years, got out, and 27 years later went back to the exact same spot to shoot 2 fishermen. The weirdo you meet might be the same one who killed people decades ago. He read about Sovereign, a man who stalked hikers across North Carolina just a few years ago. He stood outside tents at night, whispering threats to burn people alive before attacking a camp with a machete. He read about Gary Michael Hilton, the National Forest serial killer, a drifter who waited at trailheads to hunt solo hikers, decapitating a woman on Blood Mountain. And he read about the unsolved cases. Julianne and Lolly, throats slit in Shenandoah with no convictions. The killer is likely still out there. But the scariest fact Hoyt learned is this: there is no federal database for missing persons in U.S. national parks. If you vanish in the Appalachians, you don't go into a master file. You become a local cold case. Search and rescue finds lost people. They rarely find the ones who were taken. Hoyt realized that if the smiling man had used that knife instead of sharpening it, Hoyt wouldn't be a story. He would have just evaporated. So when people ask why he doesn't hike anymore, Hoyt tells them the truth. The woods are deep, and the things walking in the dark aren't just passing through. They're hunting. Tess and Waylon fell asleep on the couch of the Black Rock cabin, surrounded by snack wrappers and the glow of dying embers. At exactly 4:44 a.m., 3 heavy knocks on the front door woke them up. That was bad enough, But then they realized the fire hadn't just burned down, it was stone cold. And outside, the millions of insects screaming in the forest had gone completely silent. By the time they remembered rule number 3, they heard the front door handle turn. Appalachia doesn't play by city rules. People go out to the woods thinking they are going to find peace and quiet. They forget that the woods are alive. They are loud. They are busy. And most of all, they are old. Tess and Waylon learned this the hard way. They were just a couple of regular people looking for a break. Tess was 23 and loved the idea of camping, as long as there was a mattress involved. Waylon was the practical type. He worked with his hands, fixed his own truck, and didn't scare easily. They weren't looking for trouble. They just wanted to glamp. They rented a nice cabin in Black Rock. It was isolated, sure, miles down a dirt road where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the sky. But inside, it was luxury. The place smelled like cedar wood and lemon cleaner. They unpacked the car, and it wasn't full of survival gear. It was full of comfort. They brought a hard drive loaded with movies. They had a cooler packed with the good stuff: steak, craft beer, and a tub of expensive ice cream. They had bags of chips and fancy chocolate. This wasn't about roughing it. This was about shutting out the world and eating junk food in a pretty place. On the fridge, there was a laminated sheet of paper. It listed the house rules. Most of it was normal. Put the trash in the bear bin. Don't wear muddy boots on the carpet. But Waylon noticed rule number 3. He read it out loud while unpacking the groceries. Rule 3. If the insects and frogs stop singing, turn off all lights immediately and lock the door. Do not look out the windows. Tess laughed. She said the owner was just trying to make the place feel spooky to get better reviews. A little local flavor for the tourists. Waylon agreed. He figured it was a joke. He didn't give it a second thought. The night started off perfect. They got a massive fire roaring in the wood-burning fireplace. It was putting off a steady, cozy heat. They hooked up the laptop, piled blankets on the leather couch, and settled in. They watched movies, ate ice cream right out of the carton, and just relaxed. It was the kind of night where you forget about your job and your bills. They were so comfortable that they didn't even go to the bedroom. They just sprawled out on the couch, the fire crackling in front of them, drifting in and out of sleep. Then the weirdness started. It was 11:11 p.m. The fire had been roaring a minute ago. Suddenly, the room got dark. Waylon woke up and looked at the grate. The fire was completely out. No flames, just a little smoke drifting up the chimney. He sat up, confused. He grabbed the poker and shifted the logs. Must be wet wood, he muttered. He grabbed a starter log and lit it. The fire roared back to life instantly. It was strange, but fire is unpredictable. He shrugged it off, threw another log on, and laid back down. They fell back asleep. 1:11 a.m. Tess sat up abruptly. She felt something warm on her lip. She wiped her face and pulled her hand away. In the dim light of the dying fire, her fingers looked black. It was blood. "Waylon," she whispered, "I've got a nosebleed." Waylon groaned and rolled over. "It's the dry heat," he mumbled, eyes still closed. "From the fire." Tess grabbed a tissue from the coffee table and held it to her nose. It was annoying, but not scary. She waited for it to stop, tossed the tissue in the trash, and curled back up under the blanket. She told herself it was just the mountain air. They drifted off again. 2:22 a.m. Noise filled the room. A digital screeching sound cut through the cabin. Waylon jumped up, heart pounding. It was both of their phones. They were on the coffee table, lighting up the room. Both alarms were going off at full volume. Turn that off, Tess groaned, covering her ears. Waylon grabbed the phones. He swiped the screens. Neither of them had set an alarm. Must be a glitch, he said, sounding irritated. Maybe the service is weird out here. He tossed the phones back down. The adrenaline faded. They were tired. The food, the warmth, and the late hour made them heavy. They didn't want to think about glitches. They just wanted to sleep. They closed their eyes on the couch again. 4:44 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. 3 heavy, solid sounds echoed through the cabin. Waylon's eyes snapped open. Tess sat up, gasping. They froze. The sound had come from the front door. It wasn't the wind. It was knuckles on wood, solid, deliberate. Waylon looked at the window. It was pitch black outside. "Who comes knocking at 4 in the morning?" he whispered. He sat up and put his feet on the floor. That was when the real fear hit him. He looked at the fireplace. It was cold, not just burned down. It felt like there had never been a fire there. Then he listened. Usually the woods are loud. You hear the wind, the leaves, the millions of crickets and tree frogs. It's a wall of sound. But now, nothing. Absolute dead silence. It was like someone had unplugged the world. No wind, no bugs, no birds, just a heavy, suffocating quiet. Tess looked at him, her eyes wide. She remembered the paper on the fridge. If the insects stop singing, turn off all lights immediately. "Waylon," she breathed. "The crickets, they stopped." Waylon looked at the front door. He felt his stomach drop. When they came in with the groceries, he had shut the door. But he hadn't turned the deadbolt. He had forgotten. The silence outside was heavy. It felt like something was waiting. "Upstairs," Waylon whispered. "Now." They didn't run. They didn't want to make noise. They scrambled off the couch and moved toward the stairs. They kept their heads low. They crept up the wooden steps, their socks slipping on the varnish. They made it to the landing and ducked into the master bedroom closet. It was tight. It smelled like old cedar and mothballs. Waylon pulled the closet door shut and locked it. It was a flimsy lock, just a little push button on the handle, but it was all they had. They huddled in the back, behind a row of winter coats. They held their breath. 5 a.m. Downstairs, the front door handle turned. The hinges groaned loudly. The door drifted open. A rush of cold air came into the house. They could feel the temperature drop, even from upstairs. Then, the footsteps started. A heavy boot hit the hardwood floor. Then another. It wasn't a thief. Thieves are fast. Thieves are quiet. This thing was slow. It was taking its time. It walked through the living room. It paused by the couch where they had been sleeping just minutes ago. Waylon squeezed Tess's hand. Her fingernails dug into his palm. She was shaking so hard the coats were rustling. He pulled her tight to stop the noise. The footsteps moved to the bottom of the stairs. The first step creaked under the weight. Then the second. The cabin was so quiet that they could hear the wood bending. Whatever was walking up those stairs was heavy, much heavier than a man. The steps continued one by one. It was agonizing. The sound got closer and closer. It reached the top of the landing. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. Waylon stared at the sliver of light under the closet door. He waited to see a shadow. He waited for the door to be ripped off its hinges. He realized they were trapped. There was no other way out. The footsteps entered the bedroom. They moved across the rug. They stopped right in front of the closet. Tess shut her eyes. Waylon braced himself. He prepared to fight, even though he knew he had nothing to fight with. The handle of the closet door rattled. Just barely, like something was testing it. Then a sound broke the silence. A single cricket chirped from outside the window. Then a frog croaked. Then another. Suddenly, the wall of sound came back. The forest woke up. The wind howled through the trees. The silence was broken. And inside the room, nothing. The weight on the floorboards vanished. The presence on the other side of the door was just gone. They didn't move. They didn't check. They sat in that closet, huddled in the dark, listening to the crickets. They waited until the sun came up. They waited until light was flooding through the cracks of the closet door. Finally, at 8 a.m., Waylon unlocked the door. He pushed it open. The room was empty. The house was empty. The front door was wide open. They didn't pack the cooler. They didn't get the hard drive. They ran to the car, jumped in, and drove. They didn't speak until they were 20 miles away on the main highway. They never went back to get their stuff. And now, even when they are back in the city, safe in their apartment, they keep a fan running at night. Because if the room gets too quiet, they start to panic. They need the noise. They need to know the world is still there. Juniper turned to hand Pierce a water bottle, but he was gone. Next thing she remembers is waking up miles away, leaning against a random oak tree. When she finally made it to the station, Officer McDermott explained that you can't file a missing persons report for someone lost in a blank spot that officially doesn't exist. Most people look at the Blue Ridge Mountains and see a postcard. Visitors see rolling hills and sunsets. But those of us who work here, fixing power lines and paving roads, know better. Locals know the woods have teeth. If you step off the trail near the wrong government fence, you don't just get lost, you get erased. Juniper wasn't looking for trouble that Monday. She just wanted a break. She worked the lumber counter at Home Depot, dealing with contractors and sawdust all day. Pierce was a quiet guy from the garden department. They weren't dating. They weren't even close friends. Just two tired co-workers carpooling to a trail near Mount Weather to catch the sunset before a night shift. That was mistake number one. You don't go near that mountain when the sun goes down. Parking was easy. They left Juniper's sedan at a gravel pull-off off Route 601 at 6:55 p.m. Light was turning that strange purple-gray, making the trees look flat. Pierce complained about his manager while Juniper checked her phone. Service cut out the second they stepped past the tree line. Juniper didn't think much of it. Mountains kill signals. But then she looked at her GPS map. That little blue dot showing their location was gone. The screen was just gray. No roads, no names, just a digital void. Piece of junk, she muttered, tapping the glass. Pierce stopped walking. Listen. Juniper listened. She expected crickets or wind. She heard nothing. It was dead silent. No birds, no bugs. Even the wind seemed afraid to move the branches. Then the sound started. It came from the ground. It wasn't a noise you heard with your ears, but something you felt in your teeth. A low, mechanical grinding echoed up like a massive generator spinning deep under the dirt. It sounded electric. It made Juniper's back molars ache. "Is that a subway?" Pierce asked, laughing nervously. "There's no subways out here." "Government bunker," Juniper said, trying to sound tough. "Probably just the AC units kicking on." She was lying. This wasn't an air conditioner. It was something heavy, something angry, and it was getting louder. Walking forward seemed like the only option. Turning back felt wrong. They pushed through a thicket and stumbled into a clearing that shouldn't have been there. A fence cut across the forest floor, 12 feet high, topped with fresh razor wire. Signs zip-tied to the mesh every 50 feet didn't say, "No trespassing." They said, "Deadly force authorized, do not stop." "We should go," Pierce said, his voice thin. But Juniper was staring at what was behind the fence. It was a playground. In the middle of a restricted zone sat a merry-go-round. It wasn't modern plastic. It was old, rusty iron, paint peeling in lead strips, looking like something from the 1920s. It sat in a patch of dead yellow grass. Why would the government build a razor wire fence around a 100-year-old playground? That low grinding noise ramped up. It got higher, sharper. Then, a siren blasted from the trees. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded like a recording of a woman screaming. The sound played on a loop. A sharp, terrified yell, 3 seconds of silence, then the exact same yell. Juniper covered her ears. Pierce grabbed her jacket. "Run!" he yelled. Before they could turn, the trees separated. 2 men stepped out. They wore gray uniforms that didn't match any ranger outfit. Hats were pulled low, hiding their eyes. They didn't have guns. They had heavy black batons. They moved too fast. 1 second they were by the fence, the next they were on top of them. One man grabbed Pierce by the backpack. He didn't struggle. He went limp like a puppet with cut strings. Juniper opened her mouth to yell his name. She turned to hand him the water bottle, a reflex to anchor herself to reality. But he was already gone. The second man was right in her face. She couldn't see his eyes under the hat brim. She only saw a mouth that was a tight, straight line. He pressed a gloved hand against her forehead. The screaming siren stopped. The world went black. Waking up felt like drowning. Juniper gasped, sitting up straight. Leaves stuck to her sweaty neck. She wasn't at the fence. She was 4 miles east, slumped against an oak tree near the public parking lot. Her car was right there. The engine was cold. "Pierce?" she croaked. She checked her phone. It worked perfectly. Time was 7:15 a.m. She had been missing for 12 hours. Pierce's water bottle was in the passenger seat. Pierce was gone. She drove to the station in a daze. Officer McDermott was at the desk. He looked like a decent guy, the kind who coaches Little League. He listened to her whole story. He didn't laugh or call her crazy. He just looked at the large topographic map on the wall. "You said you were near the ridge?" McDermott asked, tracing the green paper map. "Yes," Juniper said. "There was a fence, a playground, men in gray." McDermott sighed. "Juniper, look. That area is federal land, but on the map it's just trees. There are no structures listed, no fences." "I know what I saw," she insisted. "I want to file a report." McDermott took off his glasses. He looked sympathetic but tired. "I believe that you believe it, but I can't open a missing persons case. It hasn't been 24 hours. And honestly, I have no jurisdiction there. If that spot isn't on the map, my deputies can't go looking for it without a warrant, and gray men won't get a judge to sign off." He leaned forward. "Go to your local police, where you and Pierce live. File the report there. They can contact his family and start the paper trail. That's the only way to handle this." Juniper saw the logic. He was a county cop. He couldn't invade federal land based on a ghost story. So she went home, showered, and filed the paperwork at her local precinct. The next day, she went back to work. Home Depot was exactly the same. Sawdust and forklifts. It felt strange that the world was normal when 20 miles away, a siren was screaming. At lunch, she found the store manager. "I need Pierce's contact info," she said. "I need to call his family." The manager shook his head. "I can't give you that, Juniper. Employee privacy laws. I could get fired." Is he here? Did he call in? He's a no-call, no-show, the manager said, lowering his voice. But the police called me this morning. They asked for his info. I gave them everything. They're looking into it, okay? You did your part. Juniper nodded. She stood there holding her lunch. She didn't know Pierce that well. They were just co-workers. She had filed the report. She had talked to the cops. She tried to get his info. There was nothing else she could do. She went back to the lumber counter and finished her shift. But sometimes, when the store is quiet, Juniper pulls out her phone. She opens the map. She scrolls to the mountain and zooms in. The screen goes gray. No trees, no roads, just a blank spot where a coworker used to be. And deep down, she knows the police won't find him. He's in a place that doesn't exist, listening to the ground grind beneath his feet.